Yeah, welcome back to Hornthrowers. We're joined by a guest tonight. We have Brooke from Crypt Sermon. Really excited to have you on. Ruins of Fading Light from 2019 was probably a contender for Album of the Year for me. So I was like super hyped to get the new album and sink my teeth into that. Thank you very much for joining me and Olivia tonight.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, Brooks Wilson. Yeah, the moniker sometimes Reverend Brooks Wilson. Yeah. Right. But yeah, we're happy to have it. It's been sort of just a crazy past month because we just had like the album came out and the two shows like following that, which for us was a big deal. We don't play live a lot, but that's like our favorite thing to do as a band. So it felt really good to just kind of have like a culminating moment, releasing a new album, getting back on stage, couple big stages, couple small clubs. It was really great just to play the whole variety of it.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, like especially like can imagine like sadly have never had the opportunity to see you live as I don't believe you've played the UK yet.
No, not yet. No. COVID did that to us, but we're gonna get there.
Awesome. But yeah, like I can imagine like you guys have like a very big sound that kind of like epic doom mixed with a bit of traditional heavy metal and kind of stuff like that. So I can imagine it being quite a show to see live.
Yeah, I mean, additionally to just like we're also in other live performing bands, so there's an element of I guess the aesthetic of what our band sounds like, which maybe you just said like traditional metal and epic doom, but like that's not such a consideration for us as far as playing live goes, like what kind of sound we're going for. We're really keen also on like really dialing in a powerful, aggressive live sound and putting on a good show. And I think the new album's sort of been a confirmation of like feeling like we're unchained about like genre conventions and we're just going to play heavy metal music. It's doom. I think we just are a doom band. That's just what we are. But we're not really too worried about being defined by some previous expectations.
Yeah, I think like those expectations were definitely something that I came into the new album with because I feel like the Ruins of Fading Light absolutely like leaned more towards the kind of traditional heavy metal sound. And you're kind of like with the new album, you're very much like treading in the waters of kind of like very like more like elongated kind of like atmospheric doom kind of things, and especially like tracks like Scrying Orb as well, which like have like very progressive elements on it and stuff. And it's like a bit, it still sounds like Crypt Sermon, but it's like a bit of a departure from maybe what I was expecting.
I think the band is all on the same page as far as the influences we're drawing from, and that we also we're kind of like in this band to do this band kind of long term. This for us is a special sort of project. And I think we treat our bands like each band is that, but in this arrangement of people, this is an arrangement of like shared interests and like also admiration for one another's ability as songwriters. So there's a lot of trust going into writing the music we're writing now. And I think that like this album just was like a good confirmation of like this is like our potential going forward of like drawing from the various backgrounds that each of us have, and that includes like, Matt being in Horrendous, like him stepping up into clean singing in the way he is. I don't think it's been mentioned enough, but he's doing a lot of singing on this new album. He's doing all the backups.
Okay.
And he's a big part of our live show now. And going forward, he'll continue to be a big part of our vocal approach, especially with how we want to engage with that narrative storytelling element of our music and using two different voices for that. So this album was, a confirmation, and I don't think that element of Matt Knox's vocals has yet been rightly acknowledged. So I'll use this opportunity.
I think quite possibly maybe the lineup change that kind of like maybe like grabbed people's attention was Tanner from Obsequiae joining you.
Yeah,
because obviously like Obsequiae quite a respected kind of like project in that I don't know whether you want to lean into the whole is it just melodic black metal or is it the whole castle metal thing actually a genre or not?
it
But
is
yeah,
what Obsequia does. They're a
mm,
black Obsequia is a black metal band, but they Obsequia plays what Obsequia plays, you know?
yeah.
And just, I really admire Tanner's writing for that band. He and I, of course, agree a lot on melodic death metal and interestingly, I'm not a big black metal guy otherwise.
Mm.
So it's other things that we are, you know, come to agree on. But yeah, and like I mean, I guess a big part of the band is our relationship to one another, and like it's sort of a culmination. Like I said, the band it's a project, and it's been a matter of like this is the arrangement of friends who are all culminating around like sort of a shared vision. And I think that we're now speaking a shared musical language of songs we're going to write. I don't know if I mean, I guess the song hasn't premiered yet, won't until magazine's out. But the next feature that we have coming out for a Decibel Flexi is, just one of those things that we wrote it aggressively, recorded it quickly. And, it's shown the enthusiasm for songwriting that I think is our main project. So yeah, we play epic doom metal, I guess, but we're about writing songs, and I don't think we're necessarily interested in what genre someone's going to call it. It's definitely going to be a heavy metal song.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously you said you've all like on the same page musically. I know I read, was it that you were all like the most prepared you've ever been for a record going into this one? Like, what was
Yeah.
the recording process like, and how did it differ to the last album?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times, even on the first and second album, most of the songs were like the first album had a lot more collaboration. And I think there was a little bit of a scrappiness and newness to that first album. And some whole songs were written by single members. The Ruins of Fading Light had more songs that were just like, I wrote a whole song, you know? Um, like for example, on uh Out of the Garden, in like a unique, like solo written song, I wrote a song that's featured on it, and I like, as played. And then on the second album, we didn't have me writing any song. I didn't write any song on that album. Um, and then on the newest album, there was a lot more of like throwing ideas together, like trying to come up with songs, then like kind of running it through a Brooks filter to like craft a song out of it. Some songs were wholly written, but for the most part, like there was a lot more collaboration. There was like Frank and Steve working together. Tanner wrote riffs and collaborated. Like a lot more stuff bounced around between people, and that created this cohesion. And I think like we feel really proud because we can all say we like put our stamp on that. Like, no song is one person's project. Um, and I think that it felt, that's what I'm saying is it feels that this is a culmination of musicians working together to achieve an outcome. And that's going to be like Crypt sermon music, you know. It's heavy metal, it's going to probably be doom, but it's also going to be a lot of other stuff too.
So were these songs written like, say, what, like one or two members getting together, or was it like in jam sessions, or how did you
Yeah, a little bit
get
of
churns
both,
for ideas?
actually. We have a lot of songs that are still like works in progress too. I mean, like Frank's written songs. Frank wrote songs that then would, collaborate with me, or then we'd like, refer to some stuff that Steve had and like try and interject some stuff in there. And like, yeah, then also bringing that, like, demoing that at home and sending it between one another. And then also like being like able to collaborate in the practice space, which we did just a ton more. We really just committed a lot more time to being in the room together and sharing songs, and just like, I don't think a ton of songwriting happened in the practice space so much as like confirming different attempts, because we'd have like, you know, different versions of things that I might demo out, like cut and paste part together. You know, or you know, just like, here's this riff, let's hear this riff next to it. And then like we'd have to rewrite riffs just to make them work better. So that, you know, like we didn't commit that type of time to being in a room together before, like we could have. And you know, then I think additionally having Matt as a writing aspect, moving Frank to guitar and having him be a writer because he was already writing stuff that, you know, like everybody's got input now.
Yeah. Do you find that the sort of like the nature of that, there's more spontaneity with it, like as opposed to like everybody going away and like necessarily like sort of like working on their own little things and then like throwing it together, whereas like there's more in that collaborative process, like more ideas are born out of a spontaneous kind of thing that'll happen in the room?
Not, it was, I think, more like when COVID happened, it derailed everything for us. And so we threw a lot of ourselves into other projects, and accomplished a lot doing that. And then when it came time that life was shaping up, that we could write a new album, we had like a stable lineup that we could commit to writing the new album rather than just talking about it. At that point, we just buckled down and like threw ourselves at it, wrote and recorded the album in about a year and a half, which I think for us, you know, that's a lot, that's like a lot of work to write and record something and whittle it down. And like, you know, the other aspect of that was like we were still seeing each other. We're still like, you know, Dave is half of Crypt Sermon, you know, it's basically Crypt Sermon with a different singer. And so it's like not like we weren't seeing each other and hanging out. It's just that it was just like, man, stuff's just like life. You know, Steve had a kid, like life happens, you know, and COVID, of course, was part of that, you know. So, you know, you think the 5 years, it's like, yeah, I mean, like the band's still a band, but like, you know, it felt like first album came out and I had a kid, and that basically kind of derailed a little bit of like sort of the like youthful partying type stuff that we could have done as a band. But in another way, it also gave us the ability to like handle ourselves as professionals from the get-go, because it basically didn't have a choice but to like not spend money on the band. It can't cost me too much. So we have to handle it professionally and like be the competent, capable musicians that when we can do the live stuff, you know, people show up for it. And if they show up for it, then we're going to keep showing up for it.
No, absolutely. Like, I have absolutely no doubt of crowds turning out in the droves to see you guys if you manage to make it to the UK.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. I think stuff's in the works.
Excellent.
I wanted to ask about the vocals on this new album, because I feel like listen to it, it's like they seem more mature and less. I feel like on Ruins of Fade and Light, there's more like you sort of let like loose a lot more, whereas on this album it seems more reserved, and it's like you sort of like go hit those higher registers when it suits the song, kind of thing. That makes sense. Was that a
Yeah.
conscious effort, or is it just how your voice has changed over the 5 years?
It's both. I mean, I didn't sing rock music until I started singing in this band, and I'd always just sing country music and stuff like that. So I really wasn't used to singing like in kind of basically a whole other octave that I was capable of hitting, just never really had tried to. But I had screamed in hardcore bands and metal bands and stuff. So I'd done both of those, just not singing. There's a lot that I had done that really damaged my voice by the first album, and smoking cigarettes was part of that. But like, you know, just like not taking care of myself. And I do wonder, had I, you know, taken care of myself and tried to sing like rock music at a younger age, you know, what the results might be. So basically, first album, I'm still learning how to sing in that way. And to listen back to it for me, is somewhat of a painful experience because I feel like it's quite pitchy, but the spirit's there, and you know, I committed myself to getting better. And that is why on the Ruins of Fading Light, it was conscious to have the vocals cleaned up, not quite as abrasive and aggressive and gritty. And additionally, like, try to expand my range, but I was really mostly working with doing cool harmonies and stuff like that. And I wanted the vocal mix to be pretty clean, kind of like Manowar's Kings of Metal. I really love that, and it has way more of an effect on it than Ruins of Fading Light. Ruins of Fading Light, like that, it's fairly dry vocals.
I mean, I wouldn't have made the comparison, but I can kind of like hear that you were going for that now, like, because especially like those
Yeah.
kind of like vocal fries that Eric Adams would do and
Yeah.
things like that. That I can hear what you were going for now.
Yeah, and basically what it came to was like, okay, that album was still a learning process. So the next album, I stopped thinking so much. Like, it basically stopped being about being the best singer who could hit the highest notes or whatever. I just, like, I know where my limit is. I know how high I can sing, and it's gonna have to be that because I'm getting older. And then it became more about like just communicating passion, and I really want people to hear passion in the vocals in the way that someone like Freddie Mercury communicates that, or Dio, or God, even of course like Peter Murphy. Just where sure, it's about hitting the right note, but it's mostly about how well that note and that delivery communicated that line. And writing lyrics that also feel just great and powerful to sing, and like, you know, engaging and fun. And you know, music's supposed to make people happy. It's supposed to make you feel all sorts of things, you know, but at the end of it, you almost always feel happy. And like, just wanted to feel good about it, you know? Didn't matter if I couldn't hit the highest note out of all the new metal singers or whatever. I'm not going to be a new metal singer. I'm old now.
On the topic of lyrics though, like obviously like a lot of it like tends to be like fairly esoteric things, maybe dealing with like, you know, anything from like Key of Solomon to things like that. You know, it's I was like really curious, and like when I was like doing my research for the review that I wrote for the album, like I didn't, I was kind of pushed for time, so I didn't have as much time to kind of look into maybe what the whole concept of the Stygian Rose was. I was wondering if you could like maybe elaborate on that.
Sure. Yeah, let me go on record though. Like, I mean, all the Crypt sermon lyrics are in two ways they're autobiographical. You know, they're always about something that I can talk to you about for a long time. Like, I'm passionate about what I write lyrics about because that's what I spend my extra time doing. And the second thing is they're autobiographical because they're always about something different than what you think they're about. They're always about something that, in my mind, I'm putting some emotion into. So in some way, there's a meaning to all of the Crypt sermon lyrics that only I know, right? But that's every writer, and that's every person who has a paintbrush in their hand, right? That's just the artistic process. So I commit the idea that you're always, to some degree, unable to separate the art from the artist. So I want to like acknowledge that, because I think that, you know, if someone reads an element of something unsavory in my lyrics, you can hold me accountable to that, you know? And I don't think that there is, I hope, but you know, I want to acknowledge that that's my position on why the lyrics say what they say. And perhaps when you start writing in a fictional way, which I started do like in previous Crypt Sermon albums, I was writing in an allegorical way. So I was using a subject matter that I knew something quite a lot about, and I was putting some part of my life or what I was going through, and occasionally you get like a song that's just about a thing. But for the most part, like there's feeling in the lyrics that I'm writing. But on this album, I just was able to shed the need for allegory and the need to be held accountable for what the lyrics say, because I was writing from a fictional character's perspective. And that was a fictional character who was inspired by someone who I threw myself into reading everything they wrote as best as I could find it, which is available largely in PDF format. But that's Paschal Beverly Randolph, who is an early American spiritualist. And I had already committed that thematically I was going to set this album in like something like late 1700s, early 1800s, kind of like that kind of pre-spiritualist movement. But I got really into like the idea of like seances and stuff like that, and kind of just started investigating that aspect of my life. And like, if you ask me point blank if I believe in ghosts, my answer is no, with this huge caveat that I've experienced some like pretty freaky unknown stuff.
That's how I feel as well.
Like, I don't know. So I don't know. I just like, I'm fascinated by the element of forces behind our world of perception. And you see that in all my lyrics. But that's because I've had some pretty, ungratifying experiences, right? Can't resolve how things went about the way they did. So I wrote from the perspective of someone who's fully bought into that, who I didn't have to commit myself to my skeptical worldview. I didn't have to filter that. And I was able to like invest in seeing a whole, manifested reality that I could write the lyrics in. And so it's all the lyrics are about just this fictional character who's inspired by Randolph, but is not Randolph. It's just Paschal Beverly Randolph is this person who I admire in a lot of ways. And I'm not gonna say that he was probably the most moral upstanding person, but cool kind of guy. And it's worth a good Wikipedia read. He's basically like considered the first sex magician, the first person to write about like using sex as a way of manifesting spiritual energy. It's awesome.
We first bonded, like one of the first things we kind of like bonded over when we met was sort of like a burgeoning interest in the occult, and
like through Grant Morrison and stuff like that.
And then eventually we delved into like figures like Crowley and things like that, and like it's on the topic of sadistic sex magicians.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It basically, in my opinion, it's sort of Beverly Randolph was like the forerunner that kind of like laid the groundwork for like people like Blavatsky and then later Crowley, who I mean, without a doubt, like Beverly Randolph established the Fraternal Rose, established one of the two main orders, not the AMORC. I know it's the other one, the FRO, I think. But that exists first in San Francisco, California, but then moved to Quakertown, Pennsylvania, not far from me, about an hour away, where there are some pretty cool pyramids and a rose garden, which is legend has it. Each member of the Randolph the Beverly Corporation is buried neath a rose. That's just hearsay though. But this is a real place. You can look into that. Anyhow, so suffice to say, he's just a super fascinating character and had a lot of cool, insightful, cool stuff to say. And he didn't do like orb scrying, which we have in the song, which is like very much literally about like Enochian orb scrying, the language of angels. And it's like very much coded with like references to that process, right? But he did, you know, mirror scrying and oil scrying, inspired time he spent in Turkey. You know, so it's just, I wrote a song, Scrying Orbs, about what I do know a little bit more about, which is like Enochian orb scrying. But like, you know, it was inspired by Randolph.
That's kind of an occult figure that I've
No,
never heard
haven't
of,
heard
but
of
will
it.
probably be going down a rabbit hole pretty quickly.
All his stuff is available. You can find it all. I mean, it might not be all. That's what's great about it. It might not be all. It's as far, it's, I've just read a ton of free and available tiny print. And, you know, I like do it on my phone too. So I'm like, you know, zoom in. It's just, people must think I'm crazy. But
I was going to say as well, do you sort of like start like establishing a sort of lore to the Crypt sermon lyrics? Because I know in the Stygian Rose, like the self-titled track, he referenced like the black candle flame, I swear there's echoes. Like do you like creating like the lore and like each different
yeah,
mystical part that references each other?
yeah, I like lyrically as a songwriter, and I have written the lyrics for a lot of bands, but you know, I like for each project to have its own internal lexicon, and to some degree, there's sort of like a consistent thread that is followed through every album, and you know, so it kind of, one album will refer to, like, one thing you're always going to hear on a Crypt sermon album is references to demons, because in the Crypt sermon logos and the concept of what we are, there is a world behind our world that is the pandemonic world of things beyond our control. And to some degree, I don't necessarily know that that's demons or even beings, but there certainly seems to be, in some experiences that I've had, some force of consciousness occasionally that I'm like, how the hell did that happen so coincidentally? It just is a feeling. But sometimes you can really identify those coincidental feelings. And that's basically, you know, what I think is like a sort of a magical experience, you know? And once you become able to sort of control how well you can, you know, maintain that coincidental feeling. It's like if you're like the best skateboarder and you're on a roll and you're just crushing it. That's what I'm talking about. I'm on stage and like the crowd's eating out of my hand. That's what I'm talking about. You know, that feeling of overwhelming like synchronicity. It might just be a feeling, but it's cool and it's worth chasing.
I mean, I suppose the thing that I'd kind of struggled with the occult is that as human beings, we're naturally predisposed to look for patterns because it's like a survival trait.
Right.
That it makes sense for us to have passed down evolutionarily. And then also like when we are, you know, attributing things and like, as you're saying, like certain synchronicities and like coincidences that maybe don't have inherent meaning. But then there's also the flip side of it where through kind of like ritual magic, you're usually creating your own meaning and imparting that onto things. And it's almost like a form of self-help with demons. And I'm being a bit flippant, but yeah.
It's tough to, when you sort of like, now I've like reached out and through the internet, because I committed a lot of time to it. I asked all my friends any of their experiences with, you know, like supernatural coincidences, or even trying to like summon demons. And I emailed people on internet forums I like was like after this, you know, and I've prayed, you know, and I don't think I felt quite the same thing as I felt when I let myself go in just like a full, like I personally meditate quite a lot. And so like really just like let myself, and I'm not gonna just like talk about drug use either. So when I'm talking about just like, you know, practices where you're like just trying to chase the concept of consciousness, and you melt away, you know, leaving drugs out of the picture, and leaving, you know, leaving things like that out of the picture, you know, when you sort of experience that lack of, I don't know if there's a lack of an ego or there's a lack of a connection to an ego, but I think that feels like the most fulfilling thing that also happens coincidentally when I'm just crushing it on stage or whatever. I don't know, when everything seems to be like I put all my effort into this one thing. Whenever I like finally lay that last brush stroke on there, you know, and I was like, oh my God, fuck, finally. No, that actually never happens with a painting. So I discount that one. But you know, when you like, I mean, it's that thing you hit when you're like, oh, it was the right decision. I made the right decision, and I made the right decision because of all these coincidental, like I would preemptively assume that there isn't a free will, right? Because it's all of these other forces that coincidentally guided you to make something that felt like a decision that ended up being like the fucking right one for once.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, speaking of like occult practice and stuff, do you ever like use like what Austin Osman Spare did with the automatic drawing and writing? Do you ever like write lyrics where you'll just keep writing and just see if you can find anything in there?
Yeah, I do a lot of automatic writing, but I don't sustain that. Because what I do have like is like if it comes to me, I put it down immediately and I try to stick with it for a little bit, and occasionally I can push it, but I really don't like to like sit down and sort of stream of consciousness write, because the anxiety of like overthinking, for one, I really dislike committing to like a scene in my mind that I haven't seen play out yet over a longer narrative. And that actually is a writing aspect for all the Crypt sermon stuff, but was more able to be fleshed out on the Stygian Rose because I had to more fully commit to a bigger arc, which was different than previous albums, where I was just, each song was whatever the song was. It was a collection of songs. And the Stygian Rose, while each song I think does stand apart, it is part of, and it was just by chance it lucked out that it was in the sequence of how this character's events would unfold.
Out of interest, just because you were talking about like trying to chase stories of other people's experiences and things like that, did you ever come across the I can't remember the name of the podcast, it's an occult podcast, but she interviewed Alan Moore, and he was talking about a time where him, his wife, and like two other friends basically were doing some kind of like hermetic practice or something like that. They went to bed and he effectively describes him battling a demon, like in like vivid and elaborate detail.
I wouldn't doubt that. Yeah, Alan Moore is definitely down with the sickness.
It's not like his language when describing it is very poetic as well. Like it's like worth a listen.
Yeah, I really, yeah, I'll seek out the story. You know, I know I really like Alan Moore. I blame Alan Moore maybe for like why I turned out the way I did, because if it hadn't been for getting the Swamp Thing collection, it was like a collection of Swamp Thing, I would not be this weird, freaky hippie dude. It was just it's his fault, I think. It was Swamp Thing that did it to me. Swamp Thing and Alice in Chains. And man, they should have never let me get that comic book and never let me have a radio in my room.
The Alice in Chains thing has reminded me, when listening to the new record, I said to you, there's like, a reverby 90s quality to it. And I said, like Alice in Chains.
Oh, yeah.
Is that conscious?
She did on the way here.
I mean, that's my like first, yeah, that was for me my first like heavy music, you know, and that was like, I'm not talking about, that's like me, I must have been 8, you know, and heard Man in the Box, when was that, 92? I don't know, but Man in the Box on the radio at night in my room late at night, and I was like listening to the radio. And it was, to me, at that age, the scariest song I'd ever heard in my life. and I just like wanted more. And every time I was able to hear it again, my next door neighbor had an older sister. She got Jar of Flies. I saw the I Stay Away video later. I was like, oh my God, this is just like, it's just, you know, the voice, the music, and it's heavy in its own way. It's not, I mean, it is, they're a metal influenced grunge band. They're a heavy ass band, of course, but I mean, they're not a dedicated heavy metal band or quote unquote. But just everything about it, that was like my first thing. And I wasn't, it wasn't even like the first tape I bought or something like that. It was like, then you get a little bit older and you're like, what will my parents let me buy? You know, I get like the Free Willy 2 soundtrack and like, you know, Billy Joel River of Dreams. That's okay. It's like, and then when you get to the CD store and they start letting you go by yourself with your own money, that's when all hell breaks loose, you know? And
It's just the
yeah,
nostalgia of actually buying CDs there as well.
Yeah.
CDs. Yeah. But I think CDs are back, right? Aren't they? I think we're just like committed now, like we're doing all of the petrol products, right? Committed to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't really. I'd seen that like both like cassettes and vinyl have obviously when they come back. I haven't seen like CDs really being like.
I think the last CD I bought was a gig with a band that is the only thing they had was a CD, so I just bought the CD.
Yeah, just to support the band, but yeah, like I'll be honest, like I kind of don't even go in for cassettes. I'm just like all vinyl.
I like cassettes, but
But like all of it, I mean, vinyl seems to have its own niche market and it doesn't even sell like super well, except I mean, it does fairly well in the pop world, I guess. But like it's its own niche market, right? But you discount like people who like regularly listen to music, like they sell tons of fucking like Brad Paisley CDs. Like that's an artist, you know, they don't sell Brad Paisley tapes. Y'all don't seem to know who that is. That's an American. Okay. It's an American country music. It's an American country musician. Like huge, yeah. An astoundingly popular like American country musician. Like like regular people do buy CDs, and I suppose like we sell bands sell CDs. Someone's buying them. People who drive around in cars and like don't want to run their phone data and stuff. It's just it does seem sort of weird when you start living in the world where cell signal is available basically everywhere and you're not driving a lot. But like I think the way we move around does impact like the markets for selling music, and as such like lots of tape, like cars don't have tape players anymore, but for the foreseeable future they'll probably still have CD players. That's probably a factor on CDs.
Yeah.
And why vinyl is like, you got to be at home. You can only listen to it at home,
I can just imagine a car now with like a turntable.
It would have to be on like a gyroscope, like like gyroscopic just to actually work.
It'd look cool though. Imagine like a Mad Max car, but with that in it.
And like the Doof Warrior out the front with the guitar, the flame throwing guitar, and
Devin Townsend. So yeah, we usually ask guests to pick like 5 songs that inspired them or their latest record. We did actually pre-ask you this time. Sometimes we forget and ask.
Well, like, it is fun to get a spontaneous thing sometimes, but yeah.
Well, my spontaneous answer would, fortunately, I did run it by the rest of the band, but my spontaneous answer would have been pretty good. So I'll give you what we did discuss, which was first, I just remember it. And then, are you gonna play these songs
on the radio? Yeah.
All right. So Diary of a Madman. For obvious reasons, because that's just like heavy metal, and Ozzy's big for Steve. Ozzy's obviously big for me. Sabbath, but that's an epic Ozzy song with that's like the most epic doom solo Ozzy song. And it was a big inspiration for what we were after for this album too. That they threw everything at that song, and so that's why that's on the list. The second is going to be any Bathory song, but if you're playing it on the radio, I got to insist. I mean, like Bathory's big for all of the band because they're black metal, but also up through the Viking era. One time we did, Steve and I, a Bathory challenge. Now, challenge is when you listen to all the albums from start to finish of the band and you don't stop. It's like the only thing you do. Like, and so we did it on New Year's Day, I think it was, a long time ago. And there's some good stuff in there. I'll tell you that. Bathory, pretty good band. But if you're going to play it on the radio, you got to commit the whole 11 minutes to Twilight of the Gods.
Absolutely.
So then after that, I'm going to go Shroud of Frost by Anathema. That was an inspiration. That was one we all were coming together for Stygian Rose, that album. It's just all Anathema. It's a big one for the band. And let's see, Abigail, King Diamond it's obviously that's what we're after. Sarcophagus by Nile. Nile, we're all
actually got half of these downloaded already.
I think so, yeah.
And did I think that was that all of them? I think that might have been all of them. Let's see. Did I say? Yeah, I said them all. Okay.
What would your spontaneous answer have been?
It would have been that, and I would have deliberated on the Bathory song, and I would have deliberated on the Nile song, but I think Sarcophagus was a pretty good go-to. For me, as Nile songs go, your favorite songs like always the first one that you like, just remembered in your sleep, and for me that's Black Seeds of Vengeance, but it's only sort of like because of exposure bias. But
I think for very similar reasons, I think Blood on Ice is that for me with Bathory.
Yeah.
Like Blood on Ice. Yeah. We listened to like I said, we listened to every Bathory album, and it was an experience.
I mean, like I'm mildly obsessed. I've got like a Bathory tattoo. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I've seen a fair share of them. I think there might be some in my band. Yeah, it's like that. And
do you want to share your experience of getting like the little homework project I gave you to get into black metal?
Oh yeah, because I never used to like black metal, but you were like, start out with later Bathory and work your way backwards.
So
when you get to the first album, you'll be acclimatized.
So what you did basically, it was like exposure therapy. So I got her to listen to the Bathory discography backwards.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, you're probably into more like underground cult stuff than me now.
Yeah.
So
I think that the only tough part is hitting Octagon, which isn't really super redeemable in almost any way. I mean, there's maybe some parts on it, but I think Requiem is a little bit better than most people would give it credit for. Like, I can listen to it, and honestly, I'd rather be listening to that thrash than thrash that's contemporary. So,
yeah. I think it was also like kind of like at the point it was in his career where it was sort of like, if I'm getting the order right, you'd had like the kind of first wave of his Viking era stuff, then that, and then he kind of redeems himself towards the end with like Nordland 1 and 2.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that. And then it's kind of like it's really a weird place in his discography as well to
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he definitely, I mean, you know what? What a cool band. Like,
yeah. Even without the need for big sunglasses.
Yeah. That's what what's he called? Jonas Ackland hinges his whole career on. I was the drummer in Bathory, doesn't it?
On the first album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like 90% sure that like there's even interviews with Cawthorne where they talk about how they had to record each drum individually because he wasn't good enough to actually play the beat and stuff like that.
Well, whatever he's doing now is maybe more in line with his Holy Guardian Angel. So
music videos for Madonna.
Yeah, he seems to be doing pretty well at
music
videos and stuff like that. So that's cool. And didn't he do that movie Tiny Rooms? Was that Tiny Rooms? No, I don't know.
The only film I've seen by him is the Lords of Chaos one.
Oh no. No, I think he did some other movie that's kind of like a
He did ones with Mads Mikkelsen, didn't he?
I'm not sure. I've
Yeah,
literally only the only thing I'm aware of other than his music video career is the Lords of Chaos thing.
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Um, of course, his great music videos. Um, but anyways, you know, good for him either way.
Hmm.
Yeah, and anything else, y'all?
Do you have
Um,
anything left?
um, kind of like this might be like a kind of like a really it would have like fit in kind of like better like probably earlier on whilst we were still talking about Stygian Rose, but I noticed that kind of like throughout the course of the album there was far fewer like hooks and kind of like things that maybe were like present in Ruins of Fading Light. I was wondering if that was like a specific kind of like deliberate choice that you were making that you didn't want it to have like I don't maybe because I kind of found that I warmed to the new album after a few listens as opposed to with Ruins of Fading Light where it was just an instant I fell in love with it kind of thing.
I think it's more just tempered expectations. When you say hooks, I think this album has quite a lot more hooks.
Mm.
And I think that they maybe just aren't quite as predictable. They're the kind that you like listen for and kind of on a second listen when you know it's coming, you're like, oh, that was it.
Mm.
And also that I think there's a writing element of the Ruins of Fading Light that I don't think that we're going to really be following forward, and that is kind of like a little more metal by numbers, kind of predictable, like I am singing the melody type song. I just don't think we're kind of like into like pushing forward like a more like yo ho ho heavy metal type vibe. Uh, if I had to guess what you meant by hook is the only thing. I think we deliberately didn't write some choruses a certain way that we may have written on past
Mm.
albums. Um, and that's just because I think as songwriters we're not interested in those types of big choruses anymore. Or I think especially on this album pursuing a little bit more of a emotional, delivery, and that is kind of I think that was the writing element. There are going to be some, like Scrying Orb has like a huge big hooky
Mm.
chorus. In the future, of course, we're going to have more big choruses that we're kind of known for. um there's going to be other releases coming out that might be hitting some of the sort of uh bombastic thing you might be after. But for the most part, I think we're a little bit more tied to like now writing like I don't know, we're just gonna write like what comes out of us. And I think that there is a sort of more traditional metal flair that we had on Ruins of Fading Light that I think we're kind of leaving in the past as far as just an approach to writing riffs. Who knows if the right riff comes out sounding that way, it's because we liked it so much.
So is it more just like if it fits the song and you're chasing more of the atmosphere now that it's instead of being
Yeah.
like we need this hook here to get this, it's well,
I
this
I
naturally
think that's what I'm
dovetails.
trying to say. That's exactly right. Yeah. It's really more about writing a song itself and delivering what the outcome of the song is. Like I think the song Heavy as the Crown of Bone doesn't it has a repeated part, but it basically has two repeated parts and it doesn't necessarily have what you might call a chorus, unless the end of the song is called the chorus or the second part that repeats. But yeah, like it's not written in the same sort of approach to songwriting that I think a more traditional metal song might be. And I think there's going to be a little bit more as we press forward as songwriters. We're more interested in writing songs that are captivating and alive and dynamic when it suits the song. And we're following the path of like how a song ends up and is like I said, I think earlier we did a lot of like songwriting in the practice space where it was not really about writing the riff. It was more about like gluing parts together and being like, how can we make this make sense You know, it's every note is deliberate, you know, every note that we play, you know, it's not one part pasted onto another. We had to like work to figure out how the melody moves from one place to the next. So I think we're proud of the progress we made as songwriters, and that's what we're focused on, rather than, I guess, like, yeah, satisfying choruses or whatever. You know, we want to make the fans happy, but I think, you know, I think if you're into our band this far, then you're going to start to know what you're going to get. And at that point, then we want to make fans happy by not giving them too much of the same one thing,
Oh no,
especially if our output isn't necessarily super high paced.
oh no, like absolutely, it wasn't like necessarily a criticism. It was just kind
Oh
of
no,
like,
I didn't even take it that way.
okay,
I just assumed that you meant a certain approach to songwriting, and I noticed that there's an absence of some styles of metal and maybe choruses on this album, and you know, that's deliberate. It's not a mistake.
yeah, and I think
Uh,
like tempering your expectations. I think because I had so much of a hype going into this album, whereas like Ruins of Fading Light was just a complete surprise to me when it came out as well.
mm,
Like, I think that's why it took like the third listen that I was started like to like really enjoy Stygian Rose, because it was a bit of a departure. But no,
yeah,
no, since then on subsequent listens, I've really dug it. But yeah,
and I do think that the sort of the sound of the album, The Ruins of Fading Light, is in line with contemporary traditional heavy metal bands, say for maybe a more like extreme metal drum production, but otherwise a fairly, you know, it's fairly similar to the sounds of the bands that we were contemporaries with and were playing with, you know, around that time. And with this album, it does not sound like those bands, you know, and it has, I think we were after a different production style, and we knew what we were after, and Arthur knew what we were after. And when we got in the studio, it was sort of deliberate. We knew what the album was going to sound like. We knew what the guitars were going to sound like, how the keyboards were going to sound. You know, everything was practiced, and like we knew what we were going to end up with.
Is this a production that are you going to stick with, or are there things you want to change, or?
It's going to depend on the next album. I think like keyboard sounds might change on the next album. That's going to change how the band sounds. You know, I think we're about dialing in the right guitar tones and being a guitar forward band. But the keyboards, Tanner's not just adding, he's writing guitar parts too. He's not just adding keyboards, but he's adding his knowledge of also production and how that fits into the overall dynamic of the band. So it's really going to depend on the songs, but I do think that we are going to continue with going for very clean productions that, you know, are focused on delivering really audible, like dialed in tones, not sort of so blown out and in your face and distorted and saturated, compressed, but a little bit like with a lot more depth to it. And I think the bass playing on this album added a lot to that. You know, it's not such a dirty bass. It's, you know, you can hear some grind on it, but it has more acoustic depth to it that adds in, you know, a three-dimensional layer to the sound of it that I do feel differentiates it from other traditional heavy metal.
yeah, no, I can.
Yeah. So I suppose one thing that could round it out is, do you have any tours or anything that's coming up, or any live shows planned?
The ones I can say for sure are August, I believe it's 17th. Let me check the date on it. Oh, it's, I believe, August 19th in New York City. Maybe it's August. Don't hold me to that August 19th date. But I'm looking at the wrong month. Okay, I'm gonna say we're playing Decibel Fest at the end of August. That's the 31st, and we're gonna be playing the whole album on that date. There's a whole lot of other dates coming out that I can't really talk about yet. But they are somewhat confirmed but not made public. However, like I said, August 31st, and that's at the Brooklyn Bowl here in beautiful Philadelphia. And it's the Decibel 20th anniversary show, and it's a bunch of great bands. Horrendous is gonna play, and they're gonna play all of Ecdysis. Yeah, it's gonna be great. So if
Nice.
you are a listener in Philadelphia for some reason, you better be there.
Yeah, we've had other Philadelphia bands on, so you never
Awesome.
know. We had Morgul Blade on not so long ago,
Oh,
so
word. Word.
never
Got
know.
listen more from Sonia as well.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
All
Um,
right.
but yeah, Brooks, thank you so much for joining us to talk all things Crypt Sermon. And yeah, Stygian Rose is out now on Dark Descent Records. Pick it up on whatever your favorite sort of, petrochemical, plastic, piece of media of your choice is, and support the band.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, y'all.